She fell almost into his arms, a young woman in a thin cloak, pale as the falling snow, folding to the frozen cobbles of the Christmas fair before Everett Vane, 4th Duke of Sedgeholm, had time to do more than catch her. He caught her. That was instinct, the reflex of a big man who had spent years in the saddle and the hunting field, and he had her against his chest before she struck the stones, one arm under her shoulders, and for a moment the whole roaring bright fair, the braziers, the carol singers, the stalls of gilt gingerbread and roasted chestnuts, the crowd seemed to fall away, and there was only the improbable light weight of a fainting stranger in his arms and the snow coming down gold through the torchlight. "Steady," he said absurdly to a woman who could not hear him. "I have you steady." She was cold. That was the first thing he understood, holding her. She was terribly, dangerously cold, colder than the raw December evening quite accounted for, the cold of someone who has not been warm in a long time, and her cloak, he saw, was worn nearly through and offered no more warmth than a cobweb. Her face, tipped back against his arm, was fine-boned and shadowed and far too pale, with a smudge of flour on one cheek and dark hair coming loose from a plain knot, and she was, he thought, with a jolt that had nothing to do with the cold, quite the most arresting face he had ever seen, precisely because it was so entirely unguarded. A face that in waking would surely armor itself, laid open now in its faint, exhausted and young and unbearably alone. "Make way," Everett said, and it was the ducal voice now, the one that moved crowds, and the crowd made way. "This woman is ill. Is there anyone with her? Does anyone know her?" No one did. A gingerbread seller thought she had seen the young lady buying a farthing's worth of chestnuts, and a carol singer thought she had come to the fair alone, but no one knew her name, and no one stepped forward to claim her. And the fact of that a woman could faint in the heart of a crowded fair and no soul in it be able to name her struck Everett with a force out of all proportion to the moment. She was somebody's. Everyone was somebody's. And she had fallen alone into the arms of a stranger, and no one had come. "My carriage is at the church end," he said. "I am taking her somewhere warm before she perishes on your cobbles. If anyone learns who she is, they may inquire for the Duke of Sedgeholm at the King's Head, and I will answer for her." And he gathered the stranger up against his chest. She weighed nothing, which alarmed him further, and carried her through the parting crowd and the falling snow, past the braziers and the gilt and the singing, to his waiting carriage, and did not once look back to see the fair staring after the Duke, who had never before been known to notice anyone at all. At the King's Head he took a private parlor and a fire built high, and he laid her on the settle nearest the hearth and chafed her cold hands in his big ones and sent the landlord's wife for hot bricks and broth, and he was rewarded, some minutes into it, by the flutter of her lashes and the slow, confused opening of her eyes gray-green. He saw the color of the sea under snow cloud, and by the swift dawning alarm in them as she woke to find herself in a strange, warm room with a very large, strange man holding her hands. "You are safe," Everett said at once, and let go of her hands and drew back, giving her room because he had seen the fear and would not add to it. "You are at the King's Head. You fainted at the fair, and I brought you somewhere warm, that is all. No one has harmed you, and no one will. There is broth coming. Can you sit?" slowly. She sat slowly, drawing the borrowed blanket he had thrown over her close about her thin shoulders, and looked at him with the wariness he had known would come, the face arming itself, exactly as he had guessed it would. "You are," she looked at his clothes, his bearing, the private parlor. "You are a gentleman, a great one. I cannot, sir, I cannot be here. I cannot pay for a private parlor, and I will not be beholden. Thank you for your kindness. I am quite recovered. I must go." She made to rise and swayed where she sat, and Everett was half out of his chair before she caught herself. "You are not recovered," he said, "and you are not going anywhere until you have eaten, and you owe me nothing because I have paid for nothing you asked for. Sit, please." He softened it. "I am not in the habit of asking. I find I am asking. Sit and eat, and when you are warm and fed you may go wherever you like, and I will not stop you, though I will worry, which is my affair and not yours. Will you at least tell me your name? I have carried you through half a mile of snow, and I do not even know what to call you." "Yes." She looked at him a long moment. The broth came, and the hot bricks, and the landlord's wife tucked them at her feet and went out, and the young woman wrapped her cold hands around the bowl as though it were the first warm thing she had held in weeks, and something in her face eased, fractionally, at the heat of it. "Clara," she said at last low, "Clara Winslow, and I do thank you truly, whoever you are. I have not, it has been a hard while, and I am not used to being caught when I fall. I did not expect it. Forgive me if I am ungracious. I have got out of the way of kindness, and I no longer know how to receive it." Everett Vane looked at the pale young woman drinking broth by his fire, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, saying she had got out of the way of kindness, and felt something turn over in his chest that he did not recognize and would not, for some days, be able to name, and knew only that he did not want, when she had finished the broth and warmed her hands, to let her walk out into the snow and be lost to him among the numberless somebodies of the world. "Everett Vane," he said, "Sedgeholm, and you are not ungracious, Miss Winslow. You are half-starved and frozen, and you have been made to feel a burden, I think, for a long time, and you are none of those things to me. Finish the broth. There is bread. And then, if you will allow it, you will tell me how a woman comes to faint alone at a Christmas fair with no one in a crowd of hundreds able to name her. Because I confess I have thought of nothing else since it happened, and I am not a man given to thinking of anything but myself." She told him, haltingly, over the bread and the broth, and the telling of it made Everett angrier than he had been in years, though he kept the anger from his face, because he saw that any heat from him would frighten her into silence. She was a clergyman's daughter, she said the same story he would come to learn that so many gently bred and unprotected women shared. A father dead, a small living gone with him, no fortune, no near kin willing to be troubled. She had been companion to an elderly lady these 2 years, in a house on the far side of the town, and the elderly lady had died a month since, and the heir who inherited had turned Clara out within the week with a fortnight's wages and no character. Because a young companion was an expense a bachelor heir did not want, and a temptation the servants gossiped about, and it was easier to be rid of her than to defend her. She had been living since in a garret over a chandler's shop, spending her fortnight's wages down to the last farthings, walking out each day to seek another place and finding none, because a companion without a character from her last position was a companion no respectable house would take, and the heir would give her none. "I had not eaten today," she said simply when he pressed her, and did not say it for pity, she said it as a fact she was ashamed of. "Nor much yesterday. I went to the fair because it was warm and bright, and I thought if I were going to be cold and hungry, I would rather be so somewhere there was singing. I bought a farthing of chestnuts to hold for the warmth of them, and I meant to make them last. And then the lights went strange, and the singing went far away, and I do not remember falling. I remember your voice. You said, 'I have you.'" She looked at him. "You did have me. I do not know why you troubled. Men like you do not trouble." "I begin to think," Everett said slowly, "that I have troubled about a great many wrong things for a great many years, and about nothing that mattered, and that it took a woman fainting into my arms to show me the difference." He leaned forward. "Miss Winslow, you will not go back to the garret tonight. No, hear me. I am not proposing anything a clergyman's daughter need blush at. I am too aware of your situation to insult it, and you have my word as a Sedgeholm, which is worth something even in a wretch like me. The landlord's wife here is a decent woman, and there is a clean room, and I will pay for it and for your board, and tomorrow, in daylight, with your good name entirely intact, we will decide what is to be done. I cannot in conscience carry a starving woman out of the snow and then set her back down in it. It is not in me. I did not know it was not in me until an hour ago, but there it is. You will stay, and you will let me help you, and you will do me the very great kindness of not fighting me on it, because I have discovered tonight that I have almost no practice at being of use to anyone, and I should like to do it well the first time." Clara Winslow looked at the Duke of Sedgeholm for a long moment, and Everett watched the pride and the exhaustion war in her, and watched exhaustion win, and watched her hate that it had won and forgive herself for it, all in the space of a held breath. "One night," she said, Because I cannot walk, and because you have been kinder than anyone in a month, and because I am too tired to be proud. One night, and in the morning I will go, and you will forget you ever caught a fainting stranger, and that will be the end of it." But it was not the end of it, and Everett knew it was not, and he suspected, watching her, that some part of her knew it too. He did not forget. He could not have forgotten if he tried, and he did not try. He lay awake that night in his own room at the inn thinking of the light weight of her against his chest, and the smudge of flour on her cheek, and the way she had said, "I have got out of the way of kindness." And he understood, with the sudden clarity that comes to a man perhaps twice in a life, that his own great warm houses and his own vast fortune and his own numberless comforts had never once made him feel the thing he had felt carrying a starving stranger through the snow, which was needed, and awake, and alive. In the morning he did not let her go. He had, in fact, spent much of the sleepless night arranging that he would not have to. He came down to the parlor to find her dressed and pale and braced to leave, her thin cloak about her shoulders, her farthing's worth of dignity gathered up, and he headed her off before she could make her speech. "Before you go," he said, "hear one thing and then do as you please. My aunt, the Dowager Lady Aldersgate, keeps a house not 2 hours from here and has been complaining these 6 months that she wants a companion, a real one, a gentlewoman she can talk with, not a servant. She is sharp-tongued and difficult and no fool, and she will not be imposed upon. She would see through any character I invented for you in a moment. So I will invent none. I will tell her the truth, that I found you fainting at a fair, that you were companion to old Lady Marbury who died, that the air turned you out without a character out of pure convenience, and that I have never in an hour's acquaintance met a woman I thought would suit her better. She may say no. She frequently says no. She enjoys it. But she is fair, and if she says yes, you will have a home and a wage and a formidable old woman's protection, and no one will ever again turn you into the snow. Will you let me write to her? That is all I ask. A letter, the rest is yours." Clara stared at him. "Why," she said, and her voice was not quite steady. "Why would you do this? You do not know me. I fainted on you. I am nobody, sir, a companion without a character, a burden the last house was glad to be rid of. Men like you step over women like me in the street. You do not write to your aunts about them." "I do not know why," Everett said honestly. "I have been asking myself all night. I know only that I caught you when you fell and no one else came, and I find I cannot bear the thought of being one more person who steps over you and walks on. Call it selfishness if it comforts you. I would rather be a man who did this than a man who did not, and I have been the second man my whole life and found it hollow. Let me be the first man this once. Let me write the letter." She let him write the letter. He had not meant to be at the fair at all. Everett Vane did not go to fairs. He had come to the town on the tedious business of a disputed boundary, meaning to conclude it with his lawyers and be gone before the evening, and it was only the press of the crowd in a blocked lane that had turned his carriage aside and left him, out of sheer impatience, walking the last streets on foot through the Christmas throng, cursing the delay, wanting nothing but his supper and his own fire 2 counties away. He had moved through the fair the way he moved through everything sealed, remote, a great dark figure the crowd parted for and forgot, seeing nothing, wanting nothing, a man so armored in his own consequence that 100 years of Christmas fairs could have passed before his eyes and left no mark. And then a young woman in a thin cloak had crumpled to the cobbles in front of him, and he had caught her without thinking, and the armor had cracked clean across, and he had not been the same man since. He thought about that a great deal in the weeks that followed, riding over to his aunt's house on his flimsy pretexts. He thought about how nearly he had not been there at all, how a blocked lane and a fit of impatience had put him in the one place in England where, at the one moment, a starving stranger would fall, and how if the lane had been clear he would have driven past in his sealed carriage and never known she existed, and gone home to his fire and his supper and his long, comfortable hollowness, and died an old man never having felt the thing he had felt catching her. It frightened him, how near a miss it had been. It made him, in a way he could not explain to anyone, believe for the first time in his life in something larger than his own arrangements. His aunt, sharp as a needle, watched him arrive on his sixth or seventh pretext, and put down her embroidery and fixed him with a look. "You did not," she said, "ride 11 miles to ask me about the drains. Sit down, Everett, and stop making a fool of yourself, or rather go on making a fool of yourself, but do it honestly. You are in love with my companion." "I came about the drains," Everett said. "You came about Miss Winslow. You have come about Miss Winslow every time. The drains are an insult to us both." She took up her embroidery again with the satisfied air of a woman who has said a difficult thing and enjoyed it. "I will tell you something, since you are too proud to ask. That girl has more quality in her than any titled miss you have ever refused to dance with, and I have watched you refuse them for 15 years. She is clever and she is kind and she is proud in the right way and humble in the right way, and she has been treated abominably by everyone who ought to have protected her, and she does not complain of it, which is the surest sign of breeding I know. She has done more for my spirits in 2 months than the physicians have done in 2 years. I did not expect to love her. I love her. And if you have any sense at all, which the drains lead me to doubt, you will stop dithering and secure her before some parson or half-pay major with better instincts than you carries her off, because a woman like that does not stay unclaimed once she is warm and fed, and out of the reach of the wretches who starved her." Everett was quiet a moment. She was turned into the snow and, without a character, by a man who found her inconvenient. She fainted in a crowd of hundreds and no one came. "I know it," she told me. "She tells the truth, which is another thing I like in her." The old lady's voice softened, rare and startling. "You came, Everett, that is the whole of it, in a life in which you have never once put yourself out for another soul, and I say it who have loved you since you were a squalling infant and despaired of you since you were a selfish boy. You came. You caught her, and you did not walk on, and something in you that I had given up hope of ever seeing woke up on those cobbles. Do not go back to sleep. I could not bear to watch you go back to sleep now I have seen you awake." Everett rode home 11 miles in the dusk with his aunt's words going round him, and knew that she was right, and knew that he was afraid, he, who had never feared anything, because he had never before had anything to lose. He had spent his whole life invulnerable for the simple reason that he had cared for nothing. Caring, he was discovering, was the most dangerous thing a man could do, and the only thing worth doing, and he no longer had any choice in the matter, because it had happened to him in the snow before he knew to guard against it. The next time he came, he did not mention the drains. He brought Clara a book instead, a volume of the poems her clergyman father had loved, that she had mentioned once, in passing, having lost with all the rest when the living was given up, and he had gone to some trouble to find it, and when he put it into her warm, steady hands and watched her open it and go still, and watched her look up at him with the gray-green eyes bright and astonished, he understood that he had done, at last, the only kind of thing worth doing with a fortune. He had used it to give someone back a small lost piece of themselves. She did not thank him in words. She could not, for a moment. She only held the book against her and looked at him, and Everett Vane, feared and remote and armored, felt himself undone by a look and was glad of it, and knew there was no going back to sleep now. The Dowager Lady Aldergate said yes. She said it in a letter that was 3/4 complaint and 1/4 grudging curiosity, demanding to know since when her nephew Everett had taken an interest in the welfare of anyone but himself, and announcing that she would try the girl for a month and turn her out at the first sign of missish airs. But yes, the girl might come, and Everett might stop pestering her, and he might also, while he was about it, explain to his aunt what precisely he thought he was doing. Because she had known him since he was in leading strings, and he had never in his life put himself out for a stranger, and an old woman did not believe in a leopard changing its spots without a reason wearing petticoats. Everett read the letter twice, once for the yes and once, coloring faintly, for the postscript, and delivered Clara to his aunt himself, and stayed for a fortnight at a neighboring property he suddenly recalled he needed to inspect, and found himself riding over to the Dowager's house rather more often than the inspection strictly required. He told himself he came to see how Clara went on. It was, at first, even true. He came and found her transformed by warmth and food and safety. The pallor gone, the flour-smudged exhaustion replaced by a quick, dry humor he had only glimpsed the first night, a wit that met his aunt's sharp tongue with a gentleness that somehow blunted it, so that within a fortnight the formidable dowager, who turned everyone out, was heard to declare that she would turn out her nephew before she turned out Miss Winslow, and appeared to mean it. Clara read to the old lady and walked with her, and argued with her about the wickedness of the local squire and the merits of the parson's sermons, and drew her out of the querulous solitude of her widowhood into something like happiness. And Everett, watching, understood that Clara Winslow's gift was precisely the one he lacked. She made people feel less alone, simply by being in the room, simply by caring, which she could not help doing any more than his aunt could help complaining. And he came to see her, and stopped pretending it was for his aunt. He came through Christmas and into the new year. He came in the snow and the thaw and the first hard green of spring. He found excuses and then abandoned excuses and simply came, and his aunt watched the whole progress of it with the unholy satisfaction of an old woman who has seen it all before and enjoys seeing it again, and said nothing, for once, because she did not need to. And Clara, wary Clara, who had got out of the way of kindness, learned slowly over those months to be in the way of it again, learned to expect the sound of his horse on the drive, learned to save him the arguments she knew would amuse him, and the observations she knew no one else would understand, learned, though she fought it, to light a little when he came into the room. He asked her on a clear cold afternoon in early spring, on the terrace of his aunt's house, with the last snow still lying blue in the shadows of the yews, and the first snowdrops pushing up gold-white in the beds below. "I have been coming here 5 months," he said, "on the flimsiest pretexts a grown man ever devised, and my aunt has stopped believing a single one of them, and so, I think, have you, so I will stop devising them." He turned to face her. "Clara, the night I caught you at the fair I did not know your name. I lost my heart before I learned it. I have worked that out since. It happened somewhere between the snow and the settle by the fire, before you ever told me you were Clara Winslow, when you were still only a stranger who fell and whom no one came for. I have never told anyone such a thing, and I hardly know how. But there it is. I fell in love with a woman I could not name, and then I learned her name, and everything I have learned since has only made it worse, or better. I can no longer tell the difference." Clara had gone very still. "Everett, let me finish, or I shall lose my nerve, and I have small store of it for this." He took her hands that were warm now and steady, that he had once chafed frozen in his own. "I am not offering you a place or a protection or a rescue. You have rescued yourself. You did it the moment my aunt met you, and everything since has been your own doing, not mine. I am offering you the only thing I have that is worth anything, which is the whole of a heart that never worked properly until a stranger fell into my arms and taught it how. Marry me. Not to save you, you are saved, and by your own worth, not my fortune. Marry me because I have been a hollow and useless man my whole life, and I stopped being hollow the night I caught you, and I do not want to go back to being hollow, and I do not think I can now without you. Be my Duchess. Be the woman no one could name, whom I would name before all the world every day for the rest of my life. Will you have me?" For a long moment Clara Winslow could not speak. Everett watched the old wariness rise in her, the reflex of a woman long taught that good things were not for her, that kindness was a debt and love a trap, and watched her, with a visible effort, set it down. "You caught me when I fell," she said low, "and no one came, and I told myself it meant nothing, that men like you troubled with women like me for an hour and forgot them. And you did not forget me. You wrote a letter. You told your terrifying aunt the truth. You came in the snow for 5 months on pretexts a child could see through." A tear stood in the gray-green eyes, and she let it fall, the way she had not let herself weep that first cold night. "I got out of the way of kindness because it had only ever been taken from me. You have spent 5 months teaching me to expect it again, and now you offer me a whole life of it, and I find I am too honest to pretend I do not want it with my whole heart. So yes, Everett, God keep you for a fool and bless you for a kind one. Yes, I will have you. I will be the woman you name before the world." He kissed her then once gently on the cold spring terrace with the snowdrops coming up gold-white below and the last blue snow in the shadows. The woman he had caught falling, whom no one had come for, whom he would come for now every day of his life. And behind the terrace window a formidable old lady, watching, wiped her eyes with unexpected haste and pretended when they came in, to have got something in them. They were married the following Christmas, a year to the week from the fair, in the little church near his aunt's house, with snow coming down gold through the windows and the Dowager Lady Aldersgate installed in the front pew, claiming loudly to anyone who would listen that she had arranged the entire thing, which was not true, and which no one troubled to contradict, because it made her so happy. Everett Vane took his wife home to Sedgeholm, and the great houses that had never once made him feel needed or awake or alive were, with Clara in them, all three at last. She filled them the way she had filled his aunt's querulous solitude, not with grandeur of which they had a surfeit, but with the thing he had lacked and never known he lacked, a warmth that made no one who entered feel alone. And every Christmas after, for the rest of their long lives together, the Duke and Duchess of Sedgeholm went down into the town to the Christmas fair, to the braziers and the gilt gingerbread and the carol singers, and bought a farthing's worth of roasted chestnuts to hold for the warmth of them, and stood in the falling snow where he had caught her, and Everett would say every year the same thing low only for her, "I have you." And Clara every year would answer, "You did have me, you have me still." And it was, they both agreed, the finest bargain either of them had ever made struck in the snow, over a fainting stranger, before either of them so much as knew the other's name.